Hello and welcome to Think Watercolour. Today's demonstration is a shipwreck on the Cornish coast. This is the remains of the RMS Mulheim, which went aground in, I think it was 2003, near Land's End on the Cornish coast. And I wanted to show you how to use a reference photo as a guide and how to simplify a complicated looking background. The idea is to paint with freedom and to interpret the scene in your own unique way. And here's how I went about it. This is a quarter sheet of Saunders Waterford 300 gram white rough paper, and I've just sketched very loosely some of the indentation on the rocks and some details of the boat to give me a sort of a roadmap when I'm painting, but it's just a rough guide. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to raise the board by about 15 degrees. I'm starting with a fairly thin mix of Naples yellow for the rocks on the right. They're in sunlight and not quite as dark as the other rocks on the left. Just dropped some light red in the middle, and this is a mixture of cobalt blue and a touch of neutral tint for the initial wash on the darkest part of the rocks. Just add a little bit of imperial purple to the mix and just darkening a few areas. Dropping it in loosely, all wet in wet. Just trying to indicate some of the patches of darker areas here and there. The same for some of the rocks in the water and the foreground rock on the left. I've let the initial wash dry for the background, and I've just added some imperial purple to the cobalt blue mix and a touch more of the neutral tint just to darken some of the patches. I want to get some of the darks in at this stage so that it helps with my sort of roadmap to how I'm going to finish the painting. I'm not trying to follow the photograph slavishly, I'm just using it as a guide to where the darks are and the highlights are. Just dropping in a bit of local colour with some of this light red, letting it all mix on the paper with the cobalt blue mix, with the imperial purple, etc. It's just a very rough interpretation of the background at this stage, and it will look a mess for quite a while, but that's what happens when you're painting in watercolour. Sometimes it can look as if you're never going to pull it together, and it's rapidly reaching that stage here. You just have to try and paint with a bit of confidence, knowing that this is just the first few washes, and once you start adding the darker details later, everything pulls together quite nicely. But I want to get the background in first so that I can let that dry while I'm painting other areas. For the sea, I'm using a mixture of cobalt teal and cerulean to give me this nice light green colour. It's in the photograph it's this colour. I quite like the colour. It may not be exactly how it would look in real life, but it adds quite a nice complement to the darker tones that follow later. Just leaving lots of white for the foaming water. This is the sea rushing into a break in the rocks where the boat collided and broke up and sank. Just adding a few darker patches here and there, letting it all blend wet in wet. It's just a quick sketch, so I'm not trying to be too fussy. And for some of the details on the boat, I'm using cobalt blue, fairly weak mix, just for the blue part of the boat. Just dropping in a few darker patches here and there, letting it all blend wet and wet. And for the hull of the boat, I'm using a mixture of light red and some burnt sienna, and I'll just darken this slightly as we go along in places. It's just the initial wash on the boat for the rusty parts of the boat. Again, dropping in some patches where the rust has run down the side of the boat from the portholes. As I said before, once I start putting the darker details in, the painting will start to come together. But at this stage, as I've already said, it does look a bit of a mess. But you just have to have confidence and keep going. And the whole point of my videos is really to show that you can just have a bit of fun with some watercolour. And always remember, I know I've said it loads of times, it's just a piece of paper and some coloured water, so don't get precious about it. And if you mess things up, learn from your mistakes. Just dropping in some darker patches for the hull, and same with the blue, just darkening a few areas. It's all fairly wet. Okay, once again I've let those washes dry, and I'm now starting to add a little bit more detail on the boat. I used neutral tint for the portholes, and I'm just using neutral tint just to add a bit of detail. Now I'm starting on the rocks in the background, just trying to bring it all together. And hopefully once I start adding these darks of the cracks and roughness of the rock, it will all start to pull together. I sped this video up quite a bit because it took me quite a while to paint, because there's a lot of drying time. It's a reasonable sized sheet of paper, quarter sheet of watercolour paper, so it can take a while for it to dry, and I prefer to let it dry naturally rather than use a hairdryer wherever I can. Nothing wrong with using a hairdryer, but it just sometimes tends to cause a shift in the colour somehow. I don't know, it's a minor thing, but I like to let things dry naturally. And I'm using lots of variations of bluey greys and some browns for these rocks. Just trying to scumble it all in and make sense of it, but it will pull together once I add the real darks. At this stage it's just a question of trying to define the initial shapes, where the light is and where the darker patches are. And as I work towards the edge of the rocks, where the light's shining on them a bit, they become much lighter, but the shadows in the cracks tend to be a bit darker, so it's just a question of using your imagination. As I say, I'm not slavishly following the photograph. I'm trying to create the idea that the rocks are weather worn by the sea at the base. Just darkening a few patches on the foreground rocks here, just to create a little bit of depth, define them a little bit more. I'm using the same colours for these rocks actually in the sea, so once I add a little bit of white gouache later there, it will help to define them and create movement. As you can see now, it's started to come together. There's a sort of an overhang in the rocks in the background, and just trying to define that. This is white gouache for what's left of the railings on the upper deck of the boat. I'm using a rigger just to add a little bit of foam in the water. Get these white patches of foam where the water's hitting the rocks. Now I'm starting to add the darkest darks in the rocks, and hopefully this will bring it all together and bring the background to life, adding contrast and depth to the image. It's when you add these darkest darks that the painting really comes together and stops looking a mess, and hopefully will turn out okay. Just adding a few splashes of white gouache in the sea area, and I think I'm pretty much done. Thank you so much for watching this video. As always, I hope you found it useful. Painting from reference photos is always a challenge, and the trick is not to be too slavish about what you're painting unless you really want a photographic reproduction of what you see. But just have a bit of fun with some colour and see what you can do. Do subscribe if you're not a subscriber, and hit the notification bell for future videos, and do give this video a like if you found it useful. And thanks again for watching.